G7 leaders, they are bracing for trouble when Donald Trump arrives at the G7 summit in France. The US president has already picked another fight with China, announcing an increase in tariffs on over $500 billion worth of goods and products.
Joining us now live in the studio from the US Study Centre and, of course, Sky News contributor Bruce Wolpe. Well, Bruce, welcome, but we thought that the rhetoric was softening. We thought that Donald Trump was going to find a real solution with the whole trade deal with China for his own reasons. But that seems to have been thrown out the window.
It escalated dramatically overnight. Last night, our time, China increased tariffs in response to Trump's tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. goods. And President Trump erupted a few hours ago, and he said, I'm going to slap more tariffs on $500 billion worth of goods and increase the tariff rates that I've already imposed. So the trade war is spiraling out of control. And he also said, because the chairman of the Federal Reserve was giving a very important speech about interest rates in the United States, and he said, who is the biggest enemy of the United States, the chairman of the Federal Reserve or President Xi? So you have trouble on the economic front, and you have trouble on the trade front, and it's all going to converge in Biarritz in France when the G7 meets over the weekend.
And an environmental one as well. Top of the list for the G7 summit, of course, is the Amazon fires that we've been reporting here this morning, and French President Emmanuel Macron saying it's basically an international crisis.
It is. I mean, the Amazon is called the lungs of the world. 20% of the world's oxygen comes out of Brazil. Now a lot of smoke is coming out of Brazil. The environment is very important to President Macron. The chairman of the G7 has the ability to control the agenda. He's putting us at the top of the agenda, which is good, and you will see a lot of pressure on Brazil to deal with the Amazon fires.
Bruce, with Donald Trump and with what's going on, you've been around this game a long time. You've been inside the machinery of US politics. You've worked in it. The whole social media world where one flick of a button, one flick of a message goes out, boom.
He tweeted that I am hereby ordering American companies to think about getting out of China. He does not have the legal authority to force American companies out of China, but this completely disrupts the U.S.-China. The trade war is going on, but there are networks of supply chains, of products being developed, of inter-exchange between the two countries that is occurring, and he's saying stop and bring them home.
And from an Australian point of view, this has such a big reaction here.
It does, but with Prime Minister Morrison being at the G7 by invitation, this is really significant. Of all the leaders in the room, there are two that Trump likes, Boris Johnson and Scott Morrison. So the Prime Minister is in a prime position to urge restraint and common sense and working these things out when he's there. And if if Trump will listen to anyone, it could be the Australian Prime Minister.
He's really talking down the fears of a recession, though, isn't he? I mean, we've got the layoffs of the steel industry this week, and also, as you mentioned, obviously the China trade wars. But he doesn't seem fearful at all.
Honestly, the events of the past few hours only increase the threat of recession in the United States, and then the whole world gets pneumonia. So that would be really serious. And Trump is agitated, and we heard he had several press availabilities this week, and he kept ramping up the rhetoric. He knows that if there's a recession in the United States, it hurts his reelection next year, and he wants to counter it. But at the same time, he's really drawn to this very strong confrontation with China. The issue is called decoupling. It's been a debate inside the White House. Should the U.S. decouple from China and have a different economic future? That will change the world.
We've spoken in the past about the mandate in which he came to power on, and it was getting the Rust Belt moving again. It was helping out rural America. It was building the wall. What are you hearing about the general perception from those parts of the United States towards the president at the moment?
For the first time in his presidency this week, the manufacturing index went down. And so if that holds, and if there's no market in China, if there's this decoupling and farmers can't export anymore, then that actually, and there was also J.P. Morgan, I think, or Chase, said the cost to consumers this year from higher tariffs on Chinese imports will be $1,000 per household. That's a lot of money. And so if all this bites, that could well hurt politically next year.
Now, let's talk about another thing that happened this week with Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Yes.
She had that DNA test as to whether she
tried to prove her heritage as a Native American.
Yes, she issued that apology, but it went down quite well.
She met with members of the Native American community in the United States, and it did go down well. She took a big hit in trying to stretch her heritage and so forth. And President Trump had a lot of fun with her. He calls her Pocahontas and all kinds of nonsense. And so she had a repair job to do, and she executed that pretty well.
She really wants to be that better president, doesn't she? We're very definite in her views and very progressive.
And now's the time to do a repair job 1 year out.
She is driven by values. I mean, very populist values, anti-corporate values. What's impressing people on the campaign trail, a lot of people don't agree with her. Is she too far left to get elected? But she's hard-hitting, she's coherent, she's consistent, and she kind of cuts through and reaches people. And I think after Joe Biden, I think she's the major Democratic candidate right now.
Yeah, and she's Elizabeth Warren at 70 has done so much in her life, and as a senator, she's charismatic and she is strong and she's confident. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
It will. She's a very strong anti-corporate crusader. In the Obama administration, she was in charge of cleaning up the acting for consumers against the banks. She did that. That's her base, and she's trying to broaden her appeal right now.
Really, yeah, combining the rights with the trade.
Exactly.
And so forth.
Yeah. The other person to watch after El Paso, you know, we haven't talked about guns. Nothing's going to happen in guns. It was a very bad week for the gun control debate. But Beto O'Rourke, the former congressman from El Paso, is out and now talking to Americans about we have to come together and figure out a way to deal sensibly with this insane policy on guns. And that's underway.